Imagine being convicted for a crime you didn't commit. Now imagine being in solitary confinement for years for this crime that you didn't commit. Japan is pretty well known around the world for their 99% conviction rate, and as high as that rate is, that means that sometimes innocent people are convicted. Chris Payne is one of those people that have been falsely convicted, and unfortunately the fight for his freedom is still ongoing. Let's get into it. I'm Frankie.
And Rosa.
And this is Conbini Cult. I think we can skip the song today because it's a pretty serious episode. We don't need the happy Conbini Cult song.
No jingle.
Yeah.
Today, sorry guys.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the false conviction of an American man living in Japan named Chris Payne. Just a little disclaimer before we get into it. If you are a regular listener or watcher of this podcast, you know I repeat this all the time, but that's because there's always comments like this. As Americans, we are well aware of how egregious the criminal justice system is back home. So many people have been falsely convicted back home as well. I read a ton. I just finished a memoir from a man who was on death row for 30 years and he was innocent. I read a lot of things. I watch a lot of documentaries. So trust me, we know. But it's not really helpful for this conversation to be comparing the American justice system and the Japanese one because it's different situations. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make any of what we're going to be talking about today okay. Just because you think one place might be worse than the other.
Not to mention there's so many cases that are completely different from each other. Like you can keep naming on and on and on and you will never end. So yeah, yes. This is what we're covering today.
So just a little outline of what we're going to go over today. So we're going to talk about Chris's situation, what the crime is that he was convicted for, and how he was wrongfully accused of it. Then we had a call with Percival and Hannah, who are running the advocacy Instagram page, Justice for Chris Payne. So we have a call with them. Then we're going to have some discourse about the justice system here. And then last, we're going to talk about 3 cases where people have been exonerated in recent years that are pretty well known, kind of, at least if you're into, like, I don't know, justice discourse.
Who is not into justice?
I hope you are.
Please.
And I hope that's why you're here.
So the things to keep in mind about Japan's justice system, right? So guilty until proven innocent.
Yes.
Boy, I didn't know how true that was until we delved into this.
And Japan also has a very long detention period, like even if you haven't been convicted of anything yet, so they can hold you for 23 days. And then sometimes when they release you, they can rearrest you again immediately on a slightly different charge, and then you get held for 23 days again while you're being interrogated.
Also, securing confessions during an interrogation is key for the prosecution.
Yeah, the confession, they really rely on confessions here for cases.
It's like mostly confessions.
Yes, so that's why they're pushing so hard to get the people to confess during the detention period.
Indeed.
Yeah, so let's get into who Chris is.
He's from Indiana in the USA. So he moved to Japan in 2013 and he self-studied Japanese as a teenager. So he's fluent in Japanese and he even passed the N1.
Yeah, and that is the highest level of the proficiency test.
Yes. So he's also an athlete who did like mixed martial arts, and then we learned he did soccer and then...
Yeah, like a lot of different sports. So that will come into the conversation later, his athletic background. Okay, so we're going to get into the actual case. Trigger warning for sexual assault. It's basically going to come up throughout the whole episode because that is, I mean, it is the case. So it's the key to this whole thing. So we can't avoid talking about it. So
unfortunately,
your trigger warning comes now.
Yes.
So in July 2018, a woman in Ichikawa, Chiba prefecture was attacked by a man who followed her home from the station. He grabbed her from behind, said he had a knife, and forced her to perform oral sex on him. When it was finished, the attacker fled. The victim spit out the semen. She went home to wash her mouth, gargled, and then she reported the crime to the police.
Yes. So this is the initial crime before anything happened to Chris. You know, this is completely separate from him at the time. This is 2018.
So some of the key details from her initial statement, she said that the attacker wore a hood and a mask, and it was also nighttime, so she couldn't really get a clear picture of him. He was talking throughout the assault, and she initially believed that he was Japanese because he was speaking Japanese fluently without an accent.
Makes sense. But There was issues with the evidence. The biological evidence was extremely small, and the semen was reportedly mixed with the victim's own DNA, right? Because she spit it out. She spit it out in the crime scene, and then she went home and gargled. So that kind of affected the evidence.
Yeah, and that's not to say that it's her fault for not collecting the
Absolutely not.
evidence. I think if something that traumatic happened to you, you wouldn't be in your right mind to think about, like,
I don't think I would have thought about it as
No.
well. I just want to get out of there. I want to go home.
and you want to, clean
Yeah.
yourself of that. Ew.
Of course.
So then, separately, 2 years later, this is when Chris enters the police DNA system. So in February 2020, he drunkenly fell asleep in the entryway of a residence in Yamanashi Prefecture. The owners of the home had initially called the police, but, after, it was only less than a day that he was in there, but the owners of the home, they accepted his apology. They understood, it's a drunken mistake. He seems like a nice guy. Like, it's okay.
Happens all the time.
They did not want to press charges. Before he was released, Chris voluntarily provided the police with a DNA sample via oral swab. So him not being guilty of anything else was just like, oh, okay, sure, you can have the sample.
I used to think that I would also volunteer a sample if I was asked, but
Yeah, but little did he know, and now we all know, I guess, that this sample would change his life forever.
6 months after the drunken incident, Chris' DNA was tested, and in November 2021, he was arrested and indicted on the grounds that his DNA profile was consistent with the attackers.
Yeah, it was not an exact match, but they said that there were some consistencies with it.
Right, so they use language that they use at a court of law to make it sound more credible, but you can't say that it was a match, I suppose.
Yes, that is true. So where was Chris actually at the time of the attack? He lived near the site of the attack in Chiba, but he was working that night in Shibuya at a sports bar called Tokyo Fight Club. So he said that, if they checked his phone records, he sent a lot of messages during that time. So if they checked that, they would be able to verify his location.
Cell towers.
Yes, but investigators never properly verified that phone location evidence while it was still available. And it seems like it's pretty hard to get those records in Japan years later. They kind of missed the window to easily obtain those records.
But do they still have them on record is questionable as well.
Hopefully, but I think as of now they haven't looked at it yet. Chris stated that, his coworkers could confirm that he worked that shift. And he also sent messages to his then girlfriend and his cousin during the time frame of the attack. And yes, he asked the police to check that data, but they didn't. And later they also questioned Chris's boss, and he couldn't recall the exact time that Chris left for his shift that night because he was being questioned years later about a random night. Like, he said that Chris was there, but he couldn't say exactly when he left. But overall, there was no eyewitness identification, no phone location evidence placing him at the scene, no confession, and no physical evidence besides the botched DNA analysis, which, well, let's get into a little bit of that DNA now.
Yes. So basically, this DNA analysis became like the entire evidence of the case. It became the entire case. Before the trial, Chris and his court-appointed lawyers requested a more accurate DNA test, which prosecutors assigned to, we're going to call him Professor Y.
Yeah, just in case of defamation. He is named in some articles about Chris's case, but I don't know. Just in case, Professor Y.
You never know. They might sue you.
Yeah.
But yes. So the court was told the odds of another person matching the DNA profile were astronomically low. So 1 in 17 trillion.
They kept changing that number.
They kept changing the number. This statistical presentation strongly influenced the case, and prosecutors presented the results as highly reliable in court. There were major underlying issues like the DNA sample was tiny, degraded, and mixed with another person's DNA, which was the victim, and affected by allele dropout, which can create false positive risk.
And then, so the description of the attacker kind of changed over time because they kept interviewing the victim. And it kind of seems, allegedly, like the description kind of changed to fit the narrative that the prosecutors had. Yeah, the victim reportedly did not identify Chris when shown photographs of suspects. And initially, again, she described him as sounding like a native Japanese speaker. But later, he was described as foreign. He apparently had a smell that they thought was maybe cologne. Yeah, but Chris doesn't wear cologne, and they even searched his home for cologne, and they didn't find anything because he doesn't wear it. And then it just became like, quote, foreign smell, which, what does that mean? Yes, and then it changed to the attacker speaking Japanese with a foreign accent, and he told her, because he was talking throughout the whole time, so he said that he was Indian and that his name was Masala. which
you can only scoff at.
Yeah, I mean, if like the attacker could have just been, trying to throw her off by saying these things, because she did think that it was just a Japanese person initially.
He couldn't even come up with a real name, I suppose. But alas, what do we expect from a rapist? So Chris's initial legal team, right?
Court appointed, yeah.
Court appointed. So a public defender that urged him to plead guilty, perhaps get a lesser sentence.
Yeah, they said that if he pled guilty, his sentence would be shorter.
Because the DNA statistics appeared overwhelming, his court-appointed lawyers only sought to reduce the sentence or get him out of solitary confinement if he confessed. So I guess they believed the evidence as well. Chris insisted that he was innocent and he refused to confess, of course, because why would you confess to something you didn't do?
And then now we get into where the Innocence Project Japan stepped in. So one of Chris's biggest supporters is the father of his ex-girlfriend and her family. So the father was trying to find another lawyer that would represent him more fairly, I guess, than the court-appointed ones. And he asked dozens, and he was rejected by all of them.
I heard it was 40.
50? 40? 50? At least dozens. And then finally, he found the Innocence Project Japan, the IPJ. Yeah, he reached out to them. So when they looked over the case, they were like, yeah, this is messed up. So they met with Chris and they explained to him that the Professor Y analysis was not conclusive evidence. And then Chris asked them to represent him. And they're a team of pro bono lawyers. So once private counsel is appointed, the court-appointed attorneys, they have to be removed from the case. So that delayed the trial a little bit. So the Chiba District Court, they had to cancel the one that was scheduled for January 2023, and then they rescheduled it for June 2024.
Oof, it's quite a delay.
Yeah, but I would do the same.
That's true, to get the right representation that you need.
Exactly.
So the conviction, so in July 2024, the Chiba District Court found him guilty of aggravated sexual assault and sentenced him to 8 years in prison with labor.
But he's currently still in detention. He hasn't technically started that prison sentence yet.
Yeah, he's been there for 4 years, I believe.
Yeah, he's
as of now
been in solitary 4 years.
Ridiculous.
So yeah, Chris was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and I was curious, what is the normal sentencing for a sexual assault or rape case? I found that the minimum is 5 years now, but even the definition of rape changed in 2018, and that's partially to the help of Shiori Ito's case. So she wrote the book Black Box about her assault, and the documentary Black Box Diaries, which only became available in Japan recently. It was blocked here because of confidentiality issues, because she didn't blur some people's faces or change their voices. But yeah, they expanded the definition of rape because prior to 2018, it was only considered that women could be raped, and it was basically just vaginally, like oral and anal did not count, and also men were not included in that definition. But now they are.
And that's only since 2018. It's quite insane, quite late. So because of, Professor Y, not doing his job as we would have liked.
Allegedly.
Independent experts had begun to review the evidence. A U.S. forensic DNA consultant named Simon Ford reviewed the data, and he concluded that they tested Chris' DNA before the crime scene sample.
Yeah, which kind of makes it biased.
The electropherogram charts appeared altered, and values may have been manually overridden by adding and deleting parts to make it more conclusive. Lastly, the DNA expert ran the tests 34 times.
Do you need to run the test that much if you have conclusive evidence?
That means he ran it 34 times, and the 34th time he's like, yes, finally.
To get the answer that he was hoping for.
The result I wanted.
Allegedly.
What do we know?
One of the most important developments in the case was that Chris's lawyers, they obtained the raw DNA analysis files, which was a first in a Japanese criminal case.
It's never happened before.
Normally, it's only summarized forensic conclusions that are disclosed, not the underlying electronic data. Small wins. When the independent experts saw the raw files, they challenged the prosecution's conclusions, and the disclosure became central to the appeal.
So we have all this really sad information, but finally, there was some hope. In December 2025, the Tokyo High Court ruled that there was a legitimate concerns with the DNA evidence and overturned Payne's conviction.
The court ordered the case to be returned to Chiba District Court for retrial. So, yeah, unfortunately, it means that Chris is not yet declared innocent, not until he gets that retrial, even though the conviction was overturned by the Tokyo High Court. He's requested bail at least 11 times and been rejected every time. because they say that it's because they're awaiting his retrial, so he can't go out on bail because of that. But this retrial could possibly take 2 to 3 years.
But also, he's not a flight risk because they're holding his passport. Obviously,
his now expired passport, so like he couldn't even use it.
Exactly. So why aren't they giving him bail? I don't know. So unfortunately, as you know, solitary confinement is not good for your health. And he's been in there
physically or mentally.
Yeah, he's been there like 4 years. So his health is declining. He cannot access proper medical treatment. So since December 2025, he's been experiencing severe headaches and chest pain, vomiting blood, bleeding from his mouth and nose, passing out and waking up in a pool of blood. He was placed under medical observation, but they only diagnosed him with chest muscle pain. And lastly, after an examination of his nostrils and a CT scan of his head, they claimed nothing was out of the ordinary.
Yeah, so that seems a little fishy, to say the least.
Little sus.
So now we're going to pause to have a call with Percival and Hannah, who are running the advocacy page for Chris. And just a little note, so during the call, Iwao Hakamata is referenced a lot. So we're going to kind of recap his case a little bit later when we talk about those exonerations. But just for your information right now, he was exonerated in 2024 after being on death row for 46 years for a quadruple homicide. So let's get into the call. Thank you so much for joining us for a call today. Of course, we want to get more information about it from, people who are familiar with the case and know him. So what is Chris like? Like, what kind of person is he?
Chris is, I've actually only known him since this started. I did not know him before he was arrested and indicted. The first direct contact I had with him was after he was convicted in Chiba in July 2024. And so we have a very robust backlog of letters. I actually have them with me. Here's Finder 1.
Wow.
Finder 2. Yes. So we bonded through letters. Chris is he's so charming. He can make friends with a brick wall. Honestly, he has so many different interests. It makes it really easy for him to bond with almost anyone. He likes sports. He's played, I think, professionally soccer, I believe.
Oh, wow.
He was on some kind of soccer team, out in, I believe, Gifu when he first came to Japan, something like that. He was working as a professional fighter at the Tokyo Fight Club when the crime took place in 2018. So he likes sports. He also likes science. He likes books. He's on a big Stephen King kick right now, and he loves languages. He taught himself Japanese. He taught himself modern Greek. He's now currently trying to improve his ancient Greek, all that, and Spanish, Italian, Portuguese. One of his dreams for the future when all this is over is to be able to travel around the world and have enough of different languages, especially around Europe, to just sort of get by and meet people and make friends, and to maybe earn his keep by playing music. He's also a musician, jazz, piano, guitar. He really does it all. And so there's always something new to learn about him, to talk about, and he's always very curious about other people. So it makes you feel very seen and loved, because he's just a really wonderful person to talk to.
Yeah, when I saw that, some of his biggest supporters here are the family of his ex-girlfriend.
Yes.
I think that is a big testament to his character as well.
Yes. Here's Hannah.
Hi.
I'm so sorry for the delay.
No problem. So another question that I had, I don't know if you're able to answer this or not, but because you often hear with the interrogation period and that 23-day detention, so were they really trying to coerce a confession from him at that time?
I've heard a little bit about that time from Chris. Obviously, that was in November, December 2021, so almost 5 years ago at this point. Even when I first made contact with him, that was 3-ish years later. So, and then shortly after his conviction in Chiba, that's when they were able to obtain objective proof that the DNA results have been edited. So that has become the crux of everything. But there are other very interesting and compelling and very legally relevant aspects to his case as well. During the interrogation, as far as I know, I do know that he mentioned that they were struggling to find enough evidence to indict him. So they had the DNA results. The first DNA analysis was conducted by the police lab, the police forensics lab, and There are different kinds of DNA tests. I am not an expert by any means. Honestly, Chris knows more than some experts by this point, but I do know that there were different tests look at different loci on the DNA and identify the alleles on those locus points, but which loci they look at differs and how many they look at differs. So this first DNA test conducted by the police lab looked at a smaller number than the second retest, but even so, I think it was a total of 15, I want to say, loci, but we're only able to fairly certainly identify the attacker's DNA at, I think it was 4. I believe it was 4 points. Absolutely with 100% certainty, less than half. So they do not know the attacker's full DNA profile. The second test also failed to do that. Again, did not confirm the attacker's DNA at even more than half of the loci, which is, again, creates further challenges with creating any kind of reliable match with any suspect. So what happened after that? I'm very curious about what kind of investigation the police was doing in the interim before Chris was arrested. I have no idea. I've never heard anything of that. I don't know who they questioned. I don't know if they took DNA samples from anyone else in the area. I do not know. I don't know if they ever had any likely suspects or arrested anyone. However, in February 2020, Chris was on a day trip to the Mount Fuji area in Yamanashi, and he missed his last train home. He decided to go to Conbini, get some coffee, and ride out the night at like a manga cafe or something before the first train, until the first train started. This is the story that I heard him tell in court in Chiba. When he came out of the Conbini, there was a man outside and he struck up a conversation. Again, Chris is very friendly, very sociable. They started chatting. The guy offered to buy him a drink. So they just went into the Conbini and started drinking outside and chatting. And Chris got quite drunk. And then he doesn't really have a clear memory of what happened the rest of that night. What ended up happening was he was trying to go to a karaoke bar, and it was not even across the street. It was the same building. Inside the building, the door on the left was the karaoke place. The door on the right was to a private home. Chris went into the private home and passed out in the ganggang. In the morning, he was woken up, looking up at the family. They're, I believe, 2 children and the police poking him. So obviously very upsetting incident for all parties. But the family was very understanding. They asked the police to let him go. They said he didn't do any damage. It was clearly a mistake, and he didn't do anything wrong. Just please let him go. He says that the first thing they asked when he woke up was, "Are you okay?" So the family did not have any ill will towards Chris. He was held for less than 24 hours, but before the police released him, they asked him if he would willingly submit a voluntary DNA sample. And Chris, having nothing to hide, said, sure. So eventually that gets put through their system. I do not know how all that works. It did take quite a bit of time. And eventually, whatever database they used to check against open cases flagged Chris's sample as not inconsistent with the attacker's DNA in this Chiba case. So that's a very important distinction. When I've explained this case, especially when I explain it in Japanese to Japanese people, and I use this term, they're like, oh, so it matched. I was like, no. I do believe this is very likely like a specific meaning just within the legal realm. So in Japanese, it's mujun shinai. So mujun is to be inconsistent. And so as far as they know, there's nothing in the DNA that doesn't match. And that's the most that they can say. What is known of the attacker's DNA so far doesn't show anything that's definitely not Chris. And that is about as much as they have. However, and this is a very long explanation about when he was being held initially, that was not enough to indict him. It is not enough to indict him. And they needed something else to have a strong enough case to indict him. Another challenge for the police was that the victim's description of her attacker did not match Chris. It has never matched Chris. Even when he was convicted in Chiba, the judge dismissed her statement as not relevant. This gets kind of messy. Her initial statement when she called the police, when she was attacked in 2018, was that she didn't get a look at her attacker. He was wearing a hoodie and a face mask, and it was very, very dark out. And then I believe he came up behind her and then forced her to her knees. So there was never really looking him in the eye kind of moment. She did not really have a physical description of him. The most relevant detail is that he was talking to her like throughout the attack and whatnot, and said a number of things. One of them being, I'm from India and my name is Masala. But he didn't have an accent. He sounded Japanese. So that is, as far as I know, more or less her entire description of the attacker immediately after she called the police.
It sounds like throughout the process of them interviewing her again and again, like these details get added so that
yes,
like he was a foreigner, he said he was Indian, like that all came later, right?
The Indian part was the first part of the first description. She has never said that he was Indian, at least not that I've seen in any records. The Indian part comes from what she says the attacker told her during her first statement, but she was just repeating what he said, but also said he sounded Japanese though. So whether this is the attacker trying to create some sort of like mist to obscure his identity, make it harder to find him, whether he's just a weirdo, I don't know. So don't know why you would have said that, but that is her first statement, that he said these things, he did not sound Indian, he sounded Japanese. That's about it.
So they said that the attacker was wearing a mask. Like, did they search Chris's house and like found a mask, or like?
I mean, it's just a normal face mask, and it's Japan. That would
So just a face mask.
That kind of mask.
Oh yeah, not like a mask.
Yeah,
mask. Just
I was
like a normal surgical mask. Yeah. And it's 2018, so it's also pre-COVID, but again, Japan. So it's nothing remarkable about that. So when Chris is arrested, there's this not inconsistent DNA sample, but he's not Japanese, so he does not match the victim's description. That's a problem for getting an indictment. I am not clear as to exactly what happened. I think only the police and the victim will ever know. But at some point, she was brought back in to be re-questioned about, are you sure? And again, this is in 2021. So this is more than 3 years after she was attacked. She's being asked again about what her attacker looked like. We will never know what happened in that conversation. At the end of it, the statement has changed to, actually, he was a foreigner, and I know that because he wore that strong cologne that foreigners wear. So then after that, the police search Chris's apartment. Chris literally does not own cologne. He does not use it. This was also part of the Chiba trial. He was raised in a household that really prioritized cleanliness. And I believe he said his mother had a very sensitive sense of smell, so she hated perfumes and strong scents. So he never wore it growing up, and he became used to not wearing it. He also, on the stand, discussed how when he was in Japan, at one point he was, I believe, either a daycare or a kindergarten teacher, and there's children with sensitive allergies and things like that. So he literally did not own any cologne. The only thing they found in his apartment was deodorant. The victim is called back in, and again, we'll never know what they said, but they talked to her some more, and at the end, the statement has changed again. And now the statement, she says that she knew he was a foreigner because he had that foreigner smell, like gaijin no nioi. And that's what they brought to court. So that's what he was in. Yeah. And they did a really shoddy job of investigating his alibi. I believe they asked Chris, again, more than 3 years later, where were you on this night? Chris, I believe they asked him before they allowed him to see his phone. So Chris tried to recall from memory. They investigated that. What he told them was not 100% accurate. So then when they couldn't confirm that was true, they're like, oh, he doesn't have an alibi. It wasn't until after that he was allowed to confirm his messages, I believe. And there's a lot of other issues with their lack of research of his alibi. They have not at all looked into IP address. As far as they're concerned, no alibi, not inconsistent DNA, and now they have some version of a description from the victim that they think matches Chris, or is close enough. I do not know when they showed her the photo lineup, if it was before he was indicted or after, but yes, you are correct. She was shown a photo lineup of only light-skinned foreign men, and she did not identify anyone. She said, wakarimasen. And then during the trial, there's a standard in Japan for cases like this. They erect a barrier between where the defendant and the witness box is, so she cannot see Chris during giving her testimony. I was not present for that day. I'm not entirely certain what all they discussed with her. Obviously, like the attack and what happened and what it felt like and how it's affected her life since, that seems pretty obvious. Beyond that, I'm not sure what either the prosecution or the defense would have questioned her about. But as far as I know, she has never ever said, like, pointing to Chris and said, that's the guy.
I'm also curious because he's in solitary right now and he was sentenced because I read that the minimum sentence for like a rape case would be 5 years. So like, did he have a longer sentence and is he in solitary because he did not plead guilty?
Yes and no. I've recently learned, because our team is connected to Chris's defense team, to the Innocence Project Japan, and especially with the IPJ, I asked them a lot of how does this work kind of questions. One thing that I've learned is that pre-trial detention, so for people who have not been convicted, is typically solitary in Japan.
Oh,
that is the norm.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And it is part of that hostage justice system designed to break people.
It all makes sense now.
Yes, that is the norm. So there's also probably likely other factors that were considered to, for the minority that are not held in solitary, how is that decided? I can't say, but it's not unrealistic to expect that because he was foreign, because he was Black, because he was accused of a sexual violence, that he would have been deemed like unsuitable for collaborative living or something like that. Although he is fluent in Japanese, but yes, so he's been held in solitary this entire time, and that is the norm. Also, he was sentenced to 8 years. One other, I don't want to call it a fun fact, even jokingly, one other bit from the Chiba judge's decision summary was that they selected his sentence based on the fact that he expressed no remorse. Okay. So that is, so if you don't plead guilty, you will get a longer sentence, which I mean, in Japan formally does not have plea deals. I learned as well. If you plead guilty, you will probably, again, the expressing of remorse, you will probably get a lighter sentence, but there's no official, if you plead guilty, we will give you this, as far as I know.
He's not remorseful because he didn't do it.
Exactly, right. So yeah, if you're fighting for your innocence, you're obviously not going to express remorse, so then you just get punished for that.
So frustrating. How does Hannah know Chris?
So I met Chris through Percival. I learned of his case through Percival. So Percival and I organize separately at Nam Nam Space in Koenji. And Percival alerted us to Chris's case. And since then I've had the pleasure of meeting Chris in person a few times and going consistently. And feel strongly about his case, but also the way in which it speaks to the existing system of hostage justice here, and to a system that I think is allowed to operate with undue latitude, given how obscure the systems are and those workings are to the average citizen living in Tokyo or in Japan in general.
One more thing that I was curious about is, can he have visitors? Like, is he allowed to have visitors and phone calls?
Phone calls are not a thing here. There's either like Japan Today or Japan Times maybe did an article a while back about the experience of foreign prisoners, but those were in like prisons. So that's Kimsho. Chris is currently in the detention center, Kochiso. They have different rules and regulations. I believe this article claimed that the Ministry of Justice says, or Ministry of Corrections, I suppose, says that for those whose family live abroad, that they are allowed phone calls. I don't know to what extent that's actually the case. I do know that regardless of where you come from, once you are convicted and like you're done with appeals and you are sent to an actual prison to serve out your sentence and to perform the labor that's part of your sentence, you are not allowed to have contact with anyone outside of your family. Unless you get like special permission. I do know through our organizing network, I've learned that there's some Japanese man, I believe he's serving a life sentence. I think maybe all of his family is dead or at least not in contact with him. And so there's some woman who like volunteered to be like his one approved pen pal. And that's her out of her concern for the treatment of incarcerated people. So, and I think she also got old and I believe died. And so they had to find like someone to take over the pen pal role. But you have to apply and you have to get approved. That also goes for visits for, again, once you're in prison. Letters, visits, any form of communication, the standard is that it's only your family, I believe, and maybe employer. Beyond that, nope. So one other very real threat is that if Chris fails in all of his appeals and is sent to prison, that we will lose contact with him. We will not be able to support him directly.
Can I quickly underscore like a couple of points just
Go for
to,
it.
which is, so firstly, that what Percival just described is the case for prison. So in the detention center where Chris currently is, he has one 20-minute visit per day. So it's 20 minutes supervised by a guard. You have to kind of register the language ahead of time. You say it's going to be in English. They send an English speaking guard. Japanese, they have a Japanese speaking guard. But depending on availability, so there's not always the availability for an English speaking guard. So it does depend on the day. And that is his only visit for that day. And that is only Monday through Friday.
No national holidays.
No
and
national
like
holidays,
8:30
so
to 4:30, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. You have to go during business hours, essentially.
And then the other thing too, to underscore that Percival pointed out that the most recent ruling scrapped the initial conviction, but he is still in detention, right? And there has yet to be kind of clear, or at least clear by the standards I would like, reasoning for why he's still being held there without any conviction. Not to mention the fact that prior to that conviction, initial conviction being thrown out, he was being held in solitary confinement on a bureaucratic technicality as opposed to any kind of legal reasoning or something related to his case, right? So this is likely not just Chris. This is anyone in this pre-trial detention is admitted to kind of needlessly inhumane circumstances by virtue of kind of a bureaucratic, really random kind of, bureaucratic need, I guess, or function.
Yes, in solitary, the lights are on 24/7. He's described the meals that he gets. It's not a lot of food. I think even for like the average Japanese person, it is not a lot of food. Very little protein, obviously very little fresh ingredients. Whenever I visit him, they have a commissary. You cannot send him food. You have to buy food from them. And I've actually learned that for the Osaka Detention Center, you can like make an order online. The Tokyo Detention Center does not have that system, unfortunately.
You can't even pay with card at the Tokyo system.
Oh,
Right, yeah. So you have to go in person to help him get enough food to eat. But whenever I go, I always buy him. They usually have like fresh apples and oranges. I always get him one of each. So before he went in, he was he's an athlete. He was very muscular and fit. He was a fighter. He is just, his cheekbones are just so prominent. That's one of the projects that we started recently, is inviting artists to visit Chris to sketch him, because there's no recording devices allowed in visits. You can only bring in pen and paper, and there's no there's no like recording allowed during the trials either, which is the only other opportunity to see him visually. Mm-hmm. So there's no visual documentation on our side of what this process has done to his body. And that's we've had a couple artists in to visit him to draw some sketches in those 20 minutes. So yeah, his hair is down to his waist when it's fully loose and combed out. And he's been asking for probably a couple months at this point for them to shave it, and they haven't yet. But they're only given, there's another 10 or 15 minutes to bathe every few days, I think. So it is not enough time to wash his hair, and zero access to black hair care products at all.
One last thing about his health, his current health condition.
Yes. So Chris's health is very, very poor. 2 days after the Tokyo High Court ruling in December, he collapsed. He lost consciousness. He vomited blood. His nose started bleeding. He was taken to some external hospital, which is very rare. It's usually only in very urgent situations. He doesn't know which one. I think by now we have confirmed which one it was, but they do not share that information with detainees. They did some tests, and he was watching the doctors and nurses who were very, very cold to him and refused to like look or talk to him. And he said he saw the doctor's eyes like go really, really wide when he was looking at the figures, but then he looked at Chris and said, "Oh, it's fine, it's normal." So he was sent back after, I don't know, several hours. And since then, his nose basically has not stopped bleeding. So this is 5 months now, almost to the day, 5 months now of almost daily nosebleeds, daily migraines. He's had intense chest pain, which is only getting worse. The letter I got before, the second to last letter I got, dated late April, said that he's really, really scared about the pain in his chest. I saw him, I believe, 2 days after he wrote that letter, and he's very pale, he's very weak, his speech is slurred. He constantly has his left eye shut against the pain, and also like blood coming, just always permanently blood coming from that nostril. This time he was clutching his chest over his heart, and sometimes when we would like make him laugh, he would like double over and grunt in pain. He's doing so very poorly. I don't know about now. I think now maybe it's a little bit improved, but very soon after his attack, he kept throwing up all of his food. He couldn't keep anything down. In the past month or so, he passed out again, vomited a whole bunch of blood again, and so they took him to the internal like infirmary wing, and they put him on an IV drip and had him fast for I think 4 or 5 days, which is like a valid medical procedure to sort of like limit variables and see what happens with the body essentially. But they said, oh, well, doesn't seem like anything's wrong with you. They've also said that the pain in his chest is his muscle pain, not like in his like external muscle, like pectoral kind of thing, not like his heart is in pain.
I believe it was also during this trip to the infirmary that due to kind of a neighboring patient, Chris was unable to sleep for multiple days in a row.
Yes.
And so, not to mention the fact that like a lot of these symptoms are also, exacerbated by the fact that he's not sleeping consistently anyway, due to just the nature of solitary confinement.
Mm-hmm.
That combined with nutrition, I think aspects of the bleeding and stuff are consistent with what we would expect from anemia and things like that as a result of the lack of sleep and malnutrition. Not to mention the fact that he's prevented from exercising or really any kind of physical movement throughout the day. And so a lot of really essential kind of physiological needs are not being met on a regular basis.
To say nothing of the mental impact that being in solitary confinement has on a person and how that then like further exacerbates the physical condition.
Yeah.
Yes, he had I don't know if it was a new roommate. He estimated a Japanese man in his like 70s, I think, who I guess maybe got a glimpse of Chris and his darker skin through the little window thing and screamed for, Chris says, 24 hours without stopping about how much he hated Gaijin and that Gaijin should all go home to their real countries, etc. And so it was during this period that Chris says that he did not sleep at all for 5 days for the first time. But since he's been in lockup, he has always struggled to sleep. Again, the lights are on 24/7. He's not allowed an eye mask. He's not allowed to like put the blanket over his head because the guards have to be able to observe him at all times. So he has been chronically sleep deprived for 4.5 years. He has been given some sort of sleeping aid by whatever, I don't know what kind of stuff they would give him. He said that it's ineffective. Whatever they are giving him, it does not help that much, if at all. So yes, he is being slowly tortured and quite possibly to death. That was another thing I wanted to bring up today. Actually, there is a case, another wrongful conviction case that has gained a lot of public traction. I believe there's only information in Japanese, but it is the Okawara Kakoki. That's like the name of their company. They arrested 3 people. They were all like managers or like C-suite executives at this company, chemical machinery company that's based in Yokohama. They were arrested in 2020, and they were for exporting spray dryers that could be used to manufacture biological weapons and exporting them without permission from the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry. However, eventually this case was, they were wrongfully convicted, but eventually they were able to prove that the investigation was shoddy. They did not have any genuine evidence, and they were exonerated. Bail was denied during that time. One of them, the advisor, was diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer, and he was hospitalized in February of 2021, but 2 days later, he died because of his advanced cancer. Almost a year or so from when he was arrested to when he died, 11 months-ish. I believe they did not provide, if they provided him any treatment for his cancer, it was insufficient. And by the time that they allowed him out to go to stay in a hospital, it was too late. He died 2 days later. So that is a extremely dark stain on the criminal justice system here. And Chris himself and we, his supporters, are very, very, very concerned that he will be another story like that at this rate if they keep denying him bail and medical care. One interesting connection between the Hakamata case that your podcast has reported in, I listened to that episode, and Chris's case is that during Hakamata-san's retrial, at one stage they did a blind DNA test on the bloodied shirt that allegedly had his blood on it and was what he was wearing, even though it was super small, blah, blah, blah. So to test if it was Hakamata-san's DNA. And so the prosecution provided their DNA expert, the defense provided their DNA expert. They conducted a blind test, which means neither one had access to Hakamata-san's DNA profile before they first tested the shirt. They tested the shirt, then they were allowed to test Hakamata-san's DNA. Both DNA experts did not produce a match. However, the prosecution side DNA expert then testified, please disregard my analysis. It should not be considered as evidence. I am essentially paraphrasing from what Chris has said, so it's probably not a direct quote, but at the very least, they believe, and it seems very likely, that he said that because it did not match, and he was absolutely sure that it had to, that the police could not be wrong. And so if it didn't match, regardless of like the international standard methodology that they used, disregard that, because that doesn't help the prosecution. So forget I said that. Takes the backsies, whatever.
And that's
the interesting connection. Oh yeah, the interesting connection is that the fabricated DNA in Chris's case, the one that was ordered after a judge agreed that the initial police lab test was insufficient evidence, that was the same guy. That was the exact same person who did that test, and he has provided forensic evidence on, I believe, over 1,000 cases in Japan.
How many of those are correct out of those 1,000?
Right. I mean, we wonder. It's impossible to know, but you have to ask. I think that some of the interest that the courts have to make sure that this case kind of stays fairly below the radar is the way that it implicates so many other cases and potentials for.
Yes.
I don't, whether or not I'm not saying that there's some kind of conspiracy, and I'm not alleging that in any way, but like it's possible. There's it does. I mean, I think the prosecution and ultimately kind of the current criminal justice apparatus, right, is implicated in Chris's case in such a major way that has massive ramifications for cases beyond Chris's.
But the expert is just horrible at his job.
Well, I think not to mention the fact that, and I'm sorry, I was late. I don't know if Percival's already touched on this, but DNA kind of as a form of evidence is already under, I think, quite a bit of scrutiny by activists in around the world, definitely in the U.S. where I'm from, right, as kind of a crutch for investigations and for building cases. It's like still a developing, nuanced and quite poorly understood form of forensics, but is often treated as this kind of panacea for the criminal justice or for criminal investigations. And while it's certainly scientific innovation, there's a lot that gets, as we learn in Chris's case, that can be swept under the rug by virtue slapping that DNA label on something. And especially in Japan, right, which is, not to claim that the Japanese system is behind necessarily. I think it's running as intended. It's definitely on the cutting edge of certain abuses. I think that the protocol around DNA is definitely catching up, quote unquote, to other countries by comparison. And when that data was kind of requested initially for Chris's case to be kind of looked at again by his lawyers, that was an unprecedented phenomenon in Japan. The first time
that a defense team obtained the raw data of a DNA analysis in Japan. So, which I believe is standard, or at least should be standard, in theory in the U.S. Obviously, there's a big difference between how the law is supposed to operate and how it actually operates in the U.S. and Japan and other countries. But just as a comparison, because I'm from the U.S., so when I do make comparisons, even if they're not fair, that's usually what I reach for. But yes, I do believe that at least in standard, the defense team is supposed to have access to that information. In Japan, they do not. They're not entitled to it either. So this professor's argument is that he did edit it, but he didn't disclose that. But he did have valid scientific reason to do so. He has not made a decent argument as to what.
It just says there is a reason. He hasn't.
There's a reason. There's a good reason. I swear. So.
Sure.
I believe the prosecution during the high court appeal trial argued that there was no legal obligation for him to disclose that he edited the results, which is quite possibly true, technically.
I mean, they
So
tested
it's
so
just
many
another.
times until they got the result that they wanted. Like, how is that
Yes,
not?
and I mean, in theory, technically, he perjured himself on the stand because he did not disclose that he tested the sample over 30 times. He said, I believe, 4 times was his original
It was a
test.
small sample.
So,
Exactly.
yes, there's many questions and issues surrounding this test, this person, the system that enables him. I will say that the Foreign Correspondence Club of Japan, the FCCJ, had a press conference on March 6th. You can view the video on YouTube still with one of Chris's defense lawyers, Ms. Tsunogaya Kiyomi-san. She was one of Hakamata-san's defense lawyers during that retrial. And when she learned that that same professor was involved in Chris's case, she went to go meet with him. She came from Shizuoka to meet with him. Then, I believe, in Chiba, the Chiba Detention Center, and she signed on as his 8th lawyer. Or I think now he has 7. But yes, so it was her, Mr. Handa, who is the president, director, the kaicho of the group that I'm part of behind the Instagram. And he is the father of Chris's ex-girlfriend, who has been just the nucleus of his support here in Japan. Is the one who was able to obtain the Innocence Project support for Chris. And then also Chris's mother, Ms. Rhonda Payne, she was also present in Japan. She came for that press conference. And so it's the 3 of them who go through the case, how this has affected Chris. But yes, it's a very good video. I think also a very good rundown of the issues with some of the DNA. And at one point, Mr. Honda responded to a question about whether they believed that this professor's actions were intentional or, incompetency, or what did they think, if he had any motivation to do this. Mr. Honda's answer was yes. He thinks that he has a vested interest to, produce results that are favorable to the prosecution. This professor has gotten an award from the Japanese Criminology Association or something like that. Whether or not he's even conscious of it, whether he truly believes that everyone arrested is absolutely a criminal and the police never make mistakes, we can't know for sure, but at the very least, there is no incentive for him to do otherwise in this system, and that's important. There actually is incentive to do this because the other part of that, the Hakamata-san's retrial, is that the defense's DNA expert was threatened with legal action, was accused by the prosecution of falsifying DNA evidence. I believe this is the DNA expert that Gavin interviewed in his article, so you can read more about it there. But his livelihood, his career has been jeopardized. Like, when you are blackballed by the prosecution, this work dries up. So there's also a financial incentive that if you want to keep working in this field and keep doing this type of thing, that you have to be favorable to the prosecution. You have to help them. It's fighting an uphill battle.
They have to reform this, because why does the prosecution have so much power against defense lawyers and the judge? That doesn't make sense. Why can't they take away evidence that has already been submitted and tried? That doesn't make any sense.
That's an excellent question.
Really good question. I think it raises a really important point that I think we can likely, like this professor, indicate particular individuals with, whether malicious intent or at least in
competence,
a personal kind of motivation to act against the interest of innocent people. But the system itself is not a feeling being or acting with malicious intent. It is designed kind of to operate in a way that erases kind of the humanity of the individuals within it. It is this kind of, Leviathan that crushes. And you can see that in action in other kind of areas of detention, for example, in the immigration system as well, which is connected to detention. And anytime you enter into the courtroom, right, just the procedure and the way that procedure is prioritized over the humanity of individuals. I think it's just
the fact that they can detain you.
Right.
They can just detain you for 2 days.
And then any participant in that system has procedure to kind of shield their own actions, right? That these are all legal steps. These are all acceptable forms of behavior. These are all things that exist according to the rules and according to the expectations and mores of this system. And so I think with especially this case feels, I think, so visceral is kind of the way that, Chris is, especially getting the privilege of meeting Chris as someone who is like, against all odds, really held on to their humanity in such like a frankly miraculous way, given the circumstances. And contrasted to the system that is in this moment claiming all of a sudden to give a shit about victims of sexual violence, as like the Ito Shiori's documentary was just allowed to screen.
Yes.
Right. The Black Box is just allowed to screen in this country, right? And in a place that's notoriously cruel to victims of sexual violence, and for whom there's very little legal protection or legal repercussions in any way, right? I think the case in the Pokemon Center is another example, right, of the gender-based violence that is very much permitted and allowed to occur. The contrast there is just like so stark and infuriating, I think, especially for people who are aware.
To wrap it up, I really just want to say just sort of one more thing for the other victim in this case, the sexual assault victim, because that is another piece of this, is that the police, in theory, had a duty to create some sort of closure or healing or justice for her by finding the person who attacked her, brutally attacked her. And instead of doing that, they found an easy target where they could, because of the 99% conviction rate, they could say they did it. And instead of helping her, they created a second victim. And more victims. This has victimized Chris's family. This has victimized the people who care about him. Just sort of the pain that radiates out from this is just growing by the day. And if they, I don't want to say they succeed because that ascribes intent, but if the convenient thing happens for them and Chris dies in lockup, then that pain will grow exponentially. And at the start of this, a woman was attacked and the police failed to help her. Chris has always said that he does not carry any at all, 1% at all iota blame for her. It is all based off of this fabricated DNA. Again, her statement was disregarded in the trial. He doesn't carry any, he does not think that she was responsible for any of this, and that she should have been helped and she was not.
Not to mention this cycle is still out there terrorizing women. Who knows?
In theory, yeah, we have no idea.
Yeah, they could be.
The double standard, again, because we talked about how powerful the prosecution is in this country and the way that the system is set up to work, there's also a very glaring double standard in the consideration of evidence. In Chris's case, at the Tokyo High Court, in his appeal trial, the High Court did not pursue any investigation of the claims of fabrication. According to the people that I've spoken to at the IPJ, this is almost unheard of. That typically when there are allegations of fabricated or falsified evidence, that both sides are allowed to, explain their arguments, to bring in new experts to testify, to provide evidence that, like, yes, this is fabricated or no, it is not. And then the judges will decide, is it fabricated or not? They did not do this at the Tokyo High Court. We don't know why. The lead judge was due to retire the following March. That might have been a factor. He wanted to not let this drag on. There could also be again, like Hano's going into, the motivation to keep this a little bit under wraps and not let it blow up into a big deal because of the potential consequences that it could have for the rest of the system. But they did not hear any, they admitted almost no new evidence. They did not allow any witness testimony from either side, actually. And they went almost straight to a ruling. Their ruling is also very interesting. They ruled to scrap his conviction, but they remanded his case back to the Chiba District Court, essentially to start from scratch. His defense lawyers say this is not exactly starting from zero, because again, they have the raw data, they have arguments, and I mean, on the flip side of that, the prosecution has a decent idea of what they're going to say. So it's not exactly starting from scratch, but he does have to do a completely new trial. At the moment, he is appealing to the Supreme Court based on the grounds that the Tokyo High Court did not do their duty. Just the mere fact that they did not do that and then said try again to Chiba is invalid as a ruling, is, I believe, the crux of their argument. When we compare, the Tokyo judge's explanation was that there is Again, there's objective evidence. Even the professor has acknowledged, yes, I did edit these results. Objective evidence that the results were altered. Again, he says that there is valid scientific reason to do so. We disagree. The Tokyo High Court cannot deny that they were changed, but they said that since he has such a long history of, doing this work, and he has so far been like a reliable expert witness.
Reliable.
Right. That maybe he did, maybe he didn't, and whether or not there was a valid scientific reason is a question for the Chiba court to figure out the answer to.
So to kind of close out the call, what can we do, or anybody listening or watching, to support him? Like maybe writing letters. I saw sending books is an option.
I just got a letter from Chris this morning. A week or two ago, CBS Chicago aired a story about his case, and it's gotten a lot of fresh eyes on it, which is good. But apparently there has been a wave of women writing letters to Chris, including some personal pictures, and asking him to call them when he gets out.
Deeply inappropriate letters.
Deeply inappropriate, complete strangers, really kind of getting off on his pain. It's really, really inappropriate. And he sent me a letter. I got it by express mail this morning because it's quite an urgent request. So he just wrote this. It says, "I don't want letters from unknown people anymore. Right now is a very bad time for me. I don't want these letters. I do not want these letters. Please make them stop. I received 2 more as I'm writing this. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts." Unfortunately, those people ruined it for the rest of us. If you do not already have an existing relationship with Chris, including like a pen pal relationship, even if you haven't met him, please don't write to him at this time. If that changes, we'll post about it. We just got this news this morning. I just deleted all of the posts that had the address on it. I don't know what we'll do about the book wish list. I might send that out to some trusted people in direct messages that I know won't be weird and won't try to write to him, and we'll just send the books. And unfortunately, we didn't get that much uptick in our Instagram, what do you call it? The numbers. Engagement, thank you. We didn't get that much of an increase in engagement following the CBS Chicago report. We got maybe 50 new followers, but Chris has said that he's gotten over 200 letters like this.
Wow.
So he said at least one person clearly just Googled the address of the center and just slapped his name on a letter and sent it. So we'll take this information down, when unfortunately we probably can't stop people from doing this. But if you're listening when this podcast comes out, don't do this. Do not, please. Yeah. So the best way to help advocate for Chris right now is to help with publicity, to share his case, to contact influencers, other podcasts, politicians in your country, in Japan, anyone that you think might care about this or might take an interest in this. Please, please, please help us boost and get more people to pay attention. His defense team has said that public pressure, especially from outside Japan, is actually very, very effective. So that is one direct way that you can help Chris. We will now, in light of this request from him, we will be shifting some of our messaging on the account, and we will be sharing in the short term template messages that you can send, and 2-page press releases, both in English and Japanese, about his case with the basic outline. So that will be going out in the near future, hopefully. And that is a way that people can support Chris by getting more eyes on his case. Again, we're in contact with the Innocence Project Japan. We're in contact with his legal team. We are in contact with his mother. So if people, especially journalists or in investigative podcasts or what have you, want to do something like this and they want to talk to us, they want to talk to them, we can make all of that happen. We have many, many court documents that we have permission to share. So please just help us get the word out.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us today. Yes. That was very insightful. I mean, of course, we read all the coverage that has already been published about it, but of course, yeah, it's good to get more insight. Yes.
Thank you so much
for covering us.
Thank you, guys. Yep. Okay.
All right. Bye.
And we're back. Thank you again to Percival and Hannah for chatting with us, because that clarified a lot of things.
Yes. I mean, they have inside information because Chris is sending them letters.
Yes, and they can visit.
Things we cannot do.
Yeah, so I actually didn't know that. I assumed that if you were in solitary, you would not be able to have visitors.
I thought so too.
So that is another glimmer of hope. I'm really glad to hear that, trusted people can visit him.
Yeah, he needs that. And I'm not sure about back home. I think when you're in solitary confinement, you're not allowed to have visitors because it's like a punishment, right?
I don't know, because the memoir that I just finished of the man in Alabama who was on death row for 30 years, he could have visitors.
And he was on solitary confinement.
Yeah, on death row. And he could have visitors.
They all are.
Yeah, maybe it depends on the prison, but at the place where Chris is being detained, luckily he can have visitors, so that's got to be...
Counts for something.
Yeah.
Some comfort for him.
I was also curious about the media coverage of this case. Like, was it even covered in Japanese media? And when I was Googling, it's referred to as Chris Jiken, the Chris incident in Japanese. So when I was Googling it in Japanese, the only article that I found from a major news source was one from Yahoo News in March of this year, 2026. And in English, I found a Japan Times article, also from March 2026. So that is after Chris's mother came to Japan and there was a press conference with at least one of his lawyers, which you can find on YouTube. So I'm going to link that if you want to check it out. Because, yeah, Percival said there's really, useful information in that as well.
I feel like they didn't really make a big deal about it until he appealed.
Yeah, until the Tokyo High Court overturned it.
Yeah. I guess they just covered it as a regular case. Like, oh, well, this
Someone
happened.
was arrested, yeah.
And they didn't really, brought up more attention to it. But still, the coverage is a bit scarce.
You want to talk about Chris's mom?
Yes, so Chris's mom has been advocating for his release, of course, from back home. She's been contacting senators, anyone who will listen to them, because that's her baby.
That's what you do for your beloved child.
She started
the change.org petition.
Yeah, she started the change.org petition. She's trying to of course she came here right for the press release and all that stuff. It's good that Chris has someone on his side of the ring, because otherwise he would lose hope. Yeah,
another point of discussion that you see in news coverage and, on Twitter discussions and all that too is the ethics of the justice system here. So, yeah, what are some of the concerns about that?
Right, so here they call it hostage justice. So it is a term critics use to describe parts of Japanese criminal justice systems where suspects can be kept in detention for long periods, often under pressure to confess.
Yeah, so going back to that 23-day detention period, the reliance on confessions, and then if you're wondering, word of the day, I guess, hostage justice in Japanese is hitojichi shiho. It's a new word.
Say that fast 10 times. But yeah, because I'm actually kind of a hater of most justice systems, I don't really think, even back home, I don't think we should have a prison system. I think we should change everything.
That's a story for another day. Does prison actually work?
Another question that must be answered. But, apparently winning cases and maintaining conviction records can positively affect a prosecutor's reputation and advancement prospects in Japan.
Yeah, so it can advance their career to get these convictions. So that's...
Yeah. Not to mention, compared to the defense lawyer, the prosecutor has so much more power.
Yeah. So, I mean, not to turn this discussion to anime, but if you've seen JJK, Higuruma, the lawyer, he was a defense lawyer, and he was just so frustrated with the whole criminal justice system and especially those prosecutors. So I think being a defense lawyer in Japan, oh my God, that's got to be such a hard job.
I couldn't do it. I would just crash out.
I would cry.
Cry, crash out, pull a Higuruma. You know how it is. And, when you have these systems in place, it just makes you wonder, is getting 99.9% of conviction the right thing to do?
Yeah, is it worth it when you're wrongfully convicting people sometimes?
Yeah.
Yes, and then kind of fun fact, so defense lawyers, they're independent private lawyers, and then the prosecutors are elite state officials in a centralized national bureaucracy.
And apparently they get chummy with the judges, because eventually they can become a judge.
Oh.
Yeah. And there's layers to it. I think there's 5 tiers. I'm not going to go through the whole legal system, but why?
Allegedly, that smells like corruption.
Yeah. Why don't defense lawyers have these options? I don't know.
Again, defense lawyers got to be such a hard job.
They're really just relying on that 99.9% conviction rate.
Well, they want to keep up the reputation of high conviction rate.
I think people abroad, they're like, oh my God, Japan's so great. They arrest everybody. No.
Yeah, they solve crimes all the time, or there's no crime in Japan, which, another story. Sorry, outfit change real quick. There was something important that we forgot to mention, which is, with the growing xenophobia right now, it almost seems like Chris would be the perfect scapegoat for this situation because, a lot of people, not just foreigners, just people in general here complain, or not complain, but rightfully criticize the police for not taking sexual assault seriously. And so it just seems very convenient to be like, well, we got this foreigner for it. Like, what do you mean we don't care about sexual assault? Because we convicted him.
Why this case? Why this person? It just feels a bit calculated, a little xenophobic, as you said.
Yes.
I feel like had it been anyone else, I don't think they would have gone this hard on them, unfortunately. Because, I mean, even with people that they have evidence on, they don't go this hard on. People with, like, CP.
Yeah, as we saw in the episode we did recently about, like, mangaka crimes, like, some of them were convicted of, like, or charged with, like, eliciting child prostitution, having...
Over
like,
100 prostitutes. And then...
Well, that was a producer
yeah,
for something else, not a mangaka. But, yeah, like, possession of CP, groping a minor.
They hardly got any fines.
Yes.
Let alone a conviction. But here they're going this hard on Chris. It just seems a bit suspicious to me.
Yes. Not to mention the fact that they also dismissed the victim's statement as irrelevant. If it's not for the victim, then who is this all for? Also, to add a little bit about the bail requests that have been denied. So when applying for bail, Chris's team bought a GPS ankle monitor. They proposed 24-hour surveillance in the Honda's home, where they would allow him to live. Agreed he would not own a cell phone, would have zero contact with his ex since she's part of his alibi. They submitted a letter from an external doctor who visited Chris and did an interview exam, then wrote up his report urging thorough medical testing, treatment, etc. Still denied, despite all that.
How come they're giving you all the tools to do your job and you refuse to do it? That just angers me because they're just like purposely torturing this guy. For what?
One of the articles where we got a lot of details from the case was from Gavin Blair. And there was one thing, well, a lot of stuff stood out in that article, but one thing about Professor Y seemed very fishy. So Y, the professor who carried out the prosecution DNA test, was given the Japanese Association of Criminology Award in November 2024. Take that back.
And you know, like, Professor, why can't you do your job is what I would call him. But you should want to do your job so that you can get criminals convicted, like the real ones. The real rapist is still out there.
That's another point.
Right?
I'm so sorry for the victim, too. Like, of course, to Chris and then also the victim. Because she didn't get justice either.
Nobody got justice. And it's not just Chris. And the victim is, like, Chris's mom and, like, everybody who's his friend. Like, everybody involved.
So many people are being hurt by this when, like...
For a 99.9% conviction rate.
And then going back to, you know, the retrial and everything, it seems like, in my opinion... That's my opinion, that they're dragging their feet with scheduling this retrial.
Yep. Which reminds me, what Percival and Hannah were talking about, that, you know, his health is not good. So are they just waiting for him to waste away to a point that... I know, it's dark.
So sad.
I don't want to think about it that way. God forbid that. But, you know, based on, like, the way that they didn't take care of him in the hospital, they're not caring that he's bleeding from his nose every day.
Passing out and coming to in a pool of blood, like, how does that not prompt
That's not
immediate normal. Attention?
That's not normal. And bleeding from your nose is very dangerous. Like, even a person who's not a doctor would know that, because that could be, like, a brain bleeding. It could be anything, cancer, like, all sorts of things. They're just not keeping track of him. They're not feeding him well, right? Not prison food. Detention center food is not known to be good food. It's not nutritious.
Even in I just read like a manga from this artist who was arrested for distributing obscene obscene materials because she wanted to make like a 3D printed... Her art is all about like genitalia, female genitalia.
She won her case.
Yeah, she wasn't sentenced to anything. But when she was in detention, you know, you see in the manga, like the food, a lot of the times it's like a cold croquette, maybe like a few pieces of bread. There's not really protein. There's not a lot of nutrition in what they get in detention. So, of course, as Hannah was saying in our call, that just makes all the health issues worse.
And it's always cold food. And they don't let you exercise.
Yeah, I don't understand the exercise thing, but that's a question for another day. But, so despite the 99% conviction rate, exonerations are not impossible. So I want to tell you and the listeners about 3 pretty well-known exonerations in recent years. Have you heard of Iwao Hakamata?
Yes.
I mean, aside from the call that we had.
Well, I watched that episode of your podcast as well.
That's true. Episode, I think, 71, we talked about the death penalty and this man's exoneration. So just to summarize it. So he was falsely accused of murdering his boss, his wife, and 2 children and setting their house on fire in 1966. He was interrogated for 50 days, sometimes for 16 hours at a time. He was beaten denied water, use of the toilet, and they forced his fingerprint because your fingerprint is like a stamp that they put on written documents sometimes. So yeah, they had a pre-written confession, and after beating him, they forced his thumbprint on this confession.
Jesus.
But before his trial, he took back the guilty plea and asserted his innocence. The only evidence that they had were bloody pieces of clothing that they found inside of a tank at the miso factory where he was working. The pajamas, the clothing didn't fit him, and they tested the blood because at the time they didn't have DNA testing yet. So they were just looking at blood type. But the blood type on the pajamas was type B, which Hakamata had, but that's a very common blood type. Like 20% of people in Japan have it. So that was the only evidence that they had. And he spent 46 years on death row and decades in solitary confinement. He's the world's longest serving death row inmate, which is not a title that anyone should have to claim. His death warrant was never signed because the judges were not confident that this evidence, supported his guilt. Like it was not enough, so they never signed it. But he was not fully exonerated until 2024 when he was 88 years old. So he is out now, but he's 90. He has gotten a lot of money in settlements, but that does not bring your life back. He was diagnosed with psychosis in 2009. He's now showing signs of dementia. So any money they could give him does not replace the life that they took from him.
You would think that they would learn from this. Be like, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. That's not what's happening because, we keep seeing these cases of people being wrongly incarcerated, or not incarcerated, but wrongly accused and going through this process. Must be very very traumatizing, right? And this poor man, he was in solitary confinement and for so long, but he just has dementia, mental issues and psychosis from all this.
Yeah, I think for him, he was only allowed to write letters. I don't think that he could have visitors. So yeah, imagine what that would do to you mentally.
Right, because phone calls are not a thing here, apparently.
Yeah, that's what we learned as well. All right, here's another one for you. So Keiko Aoki and Tatsuhiro Boku, there was a fire in their home in Osaka in 1995, which resulted in the death of their 11-year-old daughter. Based on a false accusation that they committed arson and murder in order to collect life insurance, they were both arrested just 2 months later. They were convicted in 1999, and both of them were given life sentences.
How did they confess? Where's the evidence?
Well, they did confess, but later recanted their confessions because it's basically psychological torture, this interrogation.
Yes.
So yeah, they recanted their confessions, both of them, because they were given under intense psychological pressure from investigators. They were both separately retried and both acquitted in 2016. So they did a test because I think the fire started from their garage. So they did a test with the exact model of car that they had. And then also in their home, they had, a water furnace that used a pilot light burner to heat up the furnace. So they concluded that it is possible that the gas could have leaked out from the car and spread to the pilot burner. And if that happened, in as little as 5 seconds, there would be an explosive fire. So yeah. They were wrongfully imprisoned for 20 years, both of them.
Imagine you going through this great loss. You lost your house, you lost your child, most importantly. You're stressed out, you feel guilty. And then they put you in this torturous process of 23-day torture of just every day.
At least. Could have been 46. Who knows?
Yeah, that's just the start. They probably, who knows how long they had them detained. But until you confess because you're too stressed out or you feel guilty for what happened to your child. And that's just horrible. And nobody should have to go through that.
And then in this case, only the police, not prosecutors, were found liable in their false conviction.
Come on. When the prosecutor is the one that chooses the evidence, everything that's about the case, they're all complicit. They should all be
found liable.
Found liable for this.
Yeah. Okay. And the last one, his name is Shoji Maekawa. So in 1986, a 15-year-old girl was killed in her home in Fukui. Maekawa was arrested a year later and accused of fatally stabbing the girl with a kitchen knife. But there was no physical evidence linking him to the crime. They arrested him based on contradictory statements from 6 witnesses. Somebody said, I saw him covered in blood on the night of the attack.
What?
And that counts?
I'm scared.
So he pleaded not guilty, stating that he never met the victim. The Fukui District Court acquitted him in 1990, but it was overturned by a higher court in 1997. He spent total around 8 years and 9 months in prison and detention. He was finally fully acquitted in August 2025. So yeah, I imagine he was just kind of fighting to clear his name, because if everybody thinks that you murdered a middle school girl, then you probably couldn't get jobs and stuff.
That's terrible. The fact that you have to clear your own name after you've been falsely accused by bystanders, it's really...
Was it just people who didn't like him?
Maybe they were confused, but it could have been people that didn't like him, because to just lie and say, like, I saw him covered in blood.
That's a really serious...
Who are you helping in that scenario? I feel like if we're in the wrong place, wrong time, like if
it could literally happen to anybody.
Yeah, I'm smiling too much, maybe they're gonna be like, she did it. Put her in jail. And there's nothing I can do. Crazy.
In the article, one of the articles I was looking at from Asahi Shimbun, there's a picture of Maekawa outside of the courthouse, and he's holding a hat from Iwao Hakamata and wearing a necktie from Keiko Aoki, the two other people that we talked about. So fun fact, or not so fun fact, the wrongfully convicted in Japan are awarded a maximum of 12,500 for each day they were incarcerated. That's a maximum, by the way. Too bad it doesn't bring back time.
That's not a lot of money. Like back home, I guess you get millions, but you can never get those 20 years that you spend in jail for what?
Yeah, what does it matter if you can't get that time back? This is not related to Japan, but the book that I finished, Anthony Ray Hinton's memoir, who was falsely convicted and on death row for 30 years, he said, like, since he's gotten out, he's met celebrities and stuff, and from, like, the coverage of his case, but his mother passed away, like, about halfway through his time in prison, so he was like, I'm gonna tear up. He was like, I would trade any of that stuff for just one more minute with my mom.
We can't keep letting them get away with this. No legal system should be convicting people and, like, doing these things to people without proper evidence, without, like, due process. It's just terrible.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest hurdles, especially in Japan, is the, like, pride, because they want to, like, maintain their conviction. They don't want to admit wrongdoing. And every exoneration, it just unravels that system little by little, which they don't want to happen.
People need to know, though, abroad, everywhere, the 99.9% or whatever they're bragging about is not a good thing.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of a good thing. It should be that you are arresting people for crimes that they committed, not just blaming people so that you can boost your career or whatever it is that they're trying to do.
And just, like, get that paperwork finished.
Boost Japanese pride. I don't know what that does. It does nothing. It's serving who?
So many people's lives are affected.
I would argue that it makes you look worse because it's a facade.
So in conclusion, going back to Chris, I cannot imagine how painful it is to be missing out on life while you're detained. So many things can happen in 4 years, even 1 year, even a week, even a day. I mean, even people who are guilty would have this pain of missing out on things. But to know that you didn't do anything and you're kind of helpless in that situation is just a different kind of pain.
And it's not just his pain, like his mother's pain, his friends, like the people that miss him.
And the victim, because again, like, she has to keep reliving this attack again and again and again. And the person who did it is still out there. He could be doing it to others.
The police could be using those resources that they're using against Chris to actually find the person who did this crime. But instead, they're like, well, we finished. We don't need to find the real culprit. And it's just really sad.
Yeah. So we're going to link the change.org petition below. So please sign that. I don't know. Maybe you think that us, like, talking about it on a podcast doesn't make a difference, but it totally does. Petitions especially, and, talking about it, it puts pressure on the courts. It can push to get that retrial started. Keep talking about it. Share his story.
It was mentioned that actually, like, outside pressure, outside of Japan, or even within Japan, like, pressure towards the court is more effective than anything else. So if you can contact, a government official, try to get them to pressure Japan.
Yeah, in the US or Japan.
Yeah, just so that we can get some justice for Chris. Free Chris.
Yeah, so thank you for listening and watching this episode. And I mean, I would love if we could record an update in the near future that says, finally Chris is out, free of that nightmare.
I really hope so.
Okay, bye guys.
Bye everyone.